It's Sunday, November 14, 2021, at about 1:30 in the afternoon. I'm Todd Dunn, and today I'm going to go for a walk in Acadia National Park. I'm over here in the southwest part of Mount Desert Island, and I'm going to walk out the Wonderland Trail. So let's get going. Well, here we are at the entrance to the trail. And this is just sort of a little side entrance to the main trail. The trail itself is an old fire road. And this trail is an out and back trail. There is a small loop at the end. It goes out a little peninsula here. And it goes to the beach. So, here we go. Out the trail. No bicycles. There are some spots where you wouldn't want to ride a bike anyway. But in general, it's a pretty easy trail to walk. As you can see, the only real hazards are that there are some low spots and it can be a little wet after it rains. And also, there are some rocks that over the years have been frost heaved up out of the main part of the trail and are now tripping hazards if you don't keep your eyes open. Here's an example right here. Now this is a very flat trail. Total elevation gain on the trail is only, both ways, maybe 50 feet. And the round trip is about a mile. And as I said, after it rains, which it did last night, there can be some kind of muddy, messy stretches. And this is one of them. See if I can cross over and not get too wet. Anyway, it's a nice trail. And this particular area is interesting historically in that it's one of the last parts of this area to be added to Acadia National Park. Most of this area, starting with the Seawall Campground and extending all the way over across the southern tip of the island to the Bass Harbor Lighthouse, was added to the park in the 30s to late 30s. Oh, I'm going to make a little digression here. One thing about this trail is, as you walk out it, you're frequently going to encounter these bedrock pavements. Like this one. We're maybe 100 yards down the trail. And here's the first bedrock pavement. These are sort of characteristic of this area. There's very little soil here. And so you'll find pavements like this periodically, and there's one spot about halfway down the trail where they're quite plentiful. Anyway, let's continue. Now, as I said, most of this area became part of Acadia National Park between about 1930 and 1938. And in fact, in this area, there's only one spot that was added to the park later, and that is the Bass Harbor Lighthouse itself. It belonged to the Coast Guard until last summer, when it was finally transferred to Acadia National Park. But most of the area over there has been in the park since the late 30s. Now this area is a little different. The land here was acquired from other private owners by George B. Dorr and John D. Rockefeller Jr. And they acquired land to either sell for a nominal cost or donate to Acadia National Park. There's the first sign of the windstorms we've been having. A tree down on the trail. And in fact, John D. Rockefeller acquired this area, which is shown on this map here. It's the triangular area that's not shaded as being in the park, in the late 30s. But he did not acquire all of the land. In the deeds where he acquired the land, there were two inliers, two homes out here where the land was not transferred. And they were both right out on the waterfront. And they included rights of access. And I suspect the main right-of-way was this old road. And for one reason or another, Rockefeller did not transfer the bulk of this land to Acadia National Park. And in fact, it appears that up until his death, he still held this land. It's hard to say why, but as of 1963, this land was still in private ownership, that of John D. Rockefeller Jr. Now, I think the reason he didn't transfer the land to the park is likely that he wanted to make a wholesale transfer of this land, including the two inliers, and that the people simply wouldn't sell. So sometime during that period, and I believe after John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s death, his estate apparently acquired the last two inliers and transferred the land to Acadia National Park. Well, I'm about halfway out the trail, and we're getting to the area where there are quite a few bedrock pavements, and this area is a spot where the Park Service really wants you to stay on the trail. I think that's largely because these pavements are covered with lichen and moss, and walking on it will kill it. Another feature up here is there are these little pine trees that have grown up through cracks in the bedrock pavement, or have rooted in cracks in the bedrock pavement. And these are sort of stunted and gnarled little trees, some more than others. Here's more of the lichen covered pavement here. And the trail itself is bedrock. Here's a particularly gnarled looking pine tree right here. I'll get up here a little bit so we're not straight into the sun and you can see it better. There we go. And as you can see, this continues for quite a ways. You can see if you look back into the woods, it's little pine trees and kind of sparse vegetation because it's just growing in the cracks in this bedrock pavement. And this is about the only place on this trail where there is a significant population of pine trees. Another kind of gnarled looking pine tree, indicating that this is not an area where the trees are going to grow up very readily. I suspect it's a function of trees rooting where a little soil has accumulated in cracks in the bedrock, and there's not a lot of nutrient, so the trees don't grow very fast. As you can see, there's quite a bit of this pavement along this route, and this is kind of the high point of the trail, and from here we're going to descend to the ocean. Okay, one last look at some of these little pine trees. Be interesting to know how old these are, but I don't think the park would appreciate me taking a core from one of them to find out just how old they are, but I suspect they're pretty old. There is kind of the last one, and then we're going to descend into a forest dominated by spruce trees. Now here is where the trail is a little rocky. We look out into the forest. And back up the trail. So I finish my panorama. So the trails, got little rocky areas like this, which this time of year is easy. A little later in the year when it gets snow covered, this can be a little bit harder to walk, particularly since there's often ice under the snow. Anyway, I'm going to stop until we get out to the ocean. About 15 minutes into the hike, the peninsula that we're walking out narrows significantly to the point where it's only about 100 feet wide, and we get to a little side path that goes out to the beach on that side, and there's more beach on the other side. Let's see if I can show you, but it's much harder to get to. Be quite a bit of bushwhacking, but it's only about 150 feet over there. So let's walk out this little path and see what the beach looks like. Right now the tide is mostly out, and as you can see, the beach is pretty rocky. And we have some leftover waves from the gale we had last night. And we're looking south right now. That's Gotts Island. And over there is Great Duck Island. So a little bit of wave action coming in. And this is a small sandy beach and then rock. At high tide, I'd probably be standing in the water right now. And I'm only a few feet off the end of the trail. Now both sides of this peninsula have coves, and at the head of each cove there is a natural seawall. That's what that is. Gravel and rocks. The wave action has piled up, and there's one on the other side of the peninsula as well. We'll see that later. And then we get out to the end of the peninsula where there is a rocky shore. So let's continue out and take a look at the end of the peninsula. Now, about 75 yards past the path out to the beach, we come to another path that goes to the beach to the right. That's west, and another path that works its way over to the beach to the left, which is east. And I think you can see that it's not very far to the beach on either side. This is the narrowest part of this peninsula. And up here, another 60 feet or so, we come to the beginning of the loop that is at the end of the peninsula. So here we are, a little loop where the trail makes a short loop and goes out to the end of the peninsula. Looks like there's a tree down across the trail up there, so I'm going to go this way, and this goes through a little spruce thicket, and there's a bit of a hill out here on the end of the peninsula, and I think there used to be a house up there, I have bushwhacked my way up there a couple of times, and there is a bit of a cleared area, or what used to be a cleared area, and an indentation in the ground that may well have been a cellar hole. But the National Park Service has done a very thorough job of eradicating signs of human habitation in this part of the park. So when we get out to the beach, I'll come back. Now, as we continue around this loop at the end of the peninsula, we're going to see frequent little side trails that go out to the beach. This is the first significant one, so we'll walk out and take a look. Now again, the tide is pretty much out. As you can see, not much water here, but every bit of the rocks that are dark will be underwater at high tide. So although right now you could probably get out to those rocks there without doing too much wading, if you had rubber boots you could probably make it, although I suspect it's kind of muddy in there. But at high tide you'd have about 7 or 8 feet of water in terms of depth to get across to make it back from those rocks out there. That is Great Cranberry Island across the Western Way, and straight across here is the seawall picnic area. So here's the rocky beach, and the rocks out there extend quite a ways out, and that is Long Ledge. I don't know if you can see it in this image, but there is a green bell buoy out there that marks the end of Long Ledge. And the patch of surf out there a ways is South Bunker Ledge. That is a ledge that has claimed a number of schooners over the years, back in the 1800s anyway. And here, when we look almost straight south, we can see both Little Duck Island, the closer island, and Great Duck Island, the more distant island. Okay, it's a nice rocky beach here. Right now, it's a bit of a trek over to the water, but yeah, at high tide, we'd only be 30 feet or so from the water. So I'm gonna continue out and we'll take a look at the beach a little further out the peninsula. Here's something interesting as we continue along this loop at the end of the peninsula. This is a lobster trap, which was probably washed up on the beach and somebody dragged it up here. And so that is what all the floats out in the water are attached to. Lobster traps like this one. They're made out of vinyl coated wire. Years ago they were made out of wood slats, but that has changed. These vinyl coated wire traps are much more durable. As we continue around the loop at the end of the peninsula. Alright, I've now gone around the end of the peninsula. We're on the west side, and here is another little path that goes out from the trail out onto the rocky shore. And you can see the Duck Islands out there as we continue down to the rocky shore here. And last night we had a westerly gale, which would be blowing from over that way, and these are leftover waves from that gale. I'm going to scramble over this pile of rocks and then pick up again when I get out on the flat rocks. Okay, here's the rocky shore out here, and again where the rocks are dark, that's underwater at high tide. So we'd be very close to the tide line here. If the tide was high, we might even be getting a little wet. And you can see the rocks of Long Ledge there. And as we look east toward Baker Island in the distance, and if you look carefully, you might be able to see a little patch of white on Baker Island, which is the Baker Island Lighthouse. And then Great Cranberry Island. And there's a sailboat sailing out. I suspect they're just out for a day sail, one of the last sailboats still in the water here on November 14, 2021. And you can see this sort of stone pavement extends out quite a ways. But as I said, at high tide, I'd probably be getting a bit wet right here. The surf might be washing over my feet. And you can see here that the dark area will pretty much always be submerged at high tide, and the lighter colored rocks not so much. Although on one of our higher tides I'd probably be in the surf here. Okay, here we are. One last look out here on a fairly nice afternoon in the middle of November. I'm going to look right into the sun so that I can show you looking further up. Now there's that cove that we were looking up from the first spot we got to the beach, which is only maybe 200 yards up there, and there is the natural seawall at the end of the cove. Okay, so I think that this view is definitely worth the walk out here. Alright, well, this finishes up my video of the Wonderland Trail. I only have about 150 feet of the loop at the end of the peninsula left to go before I get back to the trail I've already walked. And so I'm not going to film that again. Hope you enjoyed this look on a beautiful November afternoon here in November 2021. So I'll just say, if you enjoyed the video, please give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them. And with that, I'll just say, if you haven't, why don't you consider subscribing to my channel, because I'm going to be walking in Acadia National Park quite a bit over the next month and a half. And next week, I'm hoping to go and walk one of the carriage roads over near Northeast Harbor. So that is that. Thanks for watching.